In the quiet suburbs of Florida, where palm trees sway gently under the golden sun, life seemed idyllic. Neighbors exchanged pleasantries over white picket fences, children played in manicured yards, and the air was thick with the scent of blooming jasmine. But behind one of those pristine facades lay a secret that would unravel into a tale of passion, betrayal, and a darkness that defied comprehension. Meet Vivian Carver, a 32-year-old wife and mother, known in the community for her warm smile and charitable deeds. To outsiders, she epitomized the perfect suburban life. But as with many tales that end in tragedy, appearances can be deceiving. Vivian had been married to Elliot Carver, her high school sweetheart, for a decade. Their love story was the kind that inspired envy, a picturesque wedding, a cozy home, and 2 beautiful children. Yet, beneath the surface, cracks began to form. Elliot's demanding job as an investment banker meant late nights and frequent absences. Vivian, feeling the weight of loneliness and the monotony of routine, sought solace elsewhere. Enter Damian Wolfe, a charismatic fitness instructor at the local gym. Their paths crossed during a community fundraiser, and an innocent friendship quickly escalated into a passionate affair. For months they met in secrecy, stolen moments in dimly lit cafes, whispered conversations, and clandestine rendezvous. Vivian was intoxicated by the thrill, the escape from her mundane life. But as their liaison deepened, so did the complications. Damian, enamored with Vivian, began pressing her to leave Elliot. He painted vivid pictures of a future together, free from deceit. Vivian, torn between her duties as a mother and her desires, found herself at a crossroads. The weight of her double life became unbearable. Friends noticed her growing despondence, and Elliot, though preoccupied, sensed a distance. The walls were closing in. One fateful evening, after a heated argument with Damian, Vivian made a decision that would alter the course of many lives. She couldn't bear the thought of losing her children in a messy divorce, nor could she envision a life without Damian. In the dead of night, with a resolve that belied her gentle nature, Vivian enacted a plan. She prepared Elliot's favorite meal, lacing it with a potent sedative. As he lay unconscious, she staged the scene to resemble a home invasion gone wrong. The community was shattered, candlelight vigils were held, and the local news was awash with tributes to the beloved father and husband. Vivian played the role of the grieving widow to perfection, her tears convincing even the most skeptical. But secrets, as they often do, have a way of surfacing. Investigators, noting inconsistencies in Vivian's account and the crime scene, delved deeper. Phone records, surveillance footage, and testimonies began to weave a damning narrative. Confronted with the mounting evidence, Vivian's facade crumbled. She confessed, her voice a mere whisper, detailing the affair and the desperate act she believed was her only escape. The trial was swift. The once admired woman now faced the cold judgment of the law and the scorn of a betrayed community. Damian, though implicated in the affair, was found to have no knowledge of Vivian's deadly intentions and was left to grapple with his own guilt. In the end, Vivian was sentenced to life in prison, a stark reminder of how passion can morph into obsession, leading to choices that forever darken the soul. This tale serves as a chilling testament to the depths of human frailty and the unforeseen consequences of secrets harbored in the shadows. Before we uncover the chilling truth behind this case, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. We bring you real crime, real mysteries, and real justice. And trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Hit that button now, and let's begin. To understand how this tragic story unfolded, we must first step into the life of the man at its center, the man whose trust was betrayed in the worst way imaginable. His name was Elliot Carver, a devoted husband, a loving father, a man who, by all accounts, had everything to live for. To those who knew him, Elliot wasn't just another face in the crowd. He was the kind of man who left an impact wherever he went. In his professional life, he was highly respected, a senior investment banker with a sharp mind and a reputation for getting results. But outside the office, he was just as dedicated to his family, to his community, to the life he had spent years building. Elliot had met Vivian Carver in college. They were inseparable from the start, the kind of couple people described as meant to be. Their wedding was a dream, an elegant ceremony beneath the Florida sunset, attended by friends and family who were certain they were witnessing the beginning of a lifetime of happiness. And for a while, it was exactly that. They settled into a beautiful home, a sprawling property in a quiet Florida suburb. They had 2 children, both still young, both completely unaware of the storm that was about to tear their world apart. To outsiders, the Carvers were perfect, a picture of stability, a family that seemed to have it all. But behind closed doors, the reality was much different. To understand the crime, we need to understand the woman who committed it. Vivian Carver wasn't just another suburban wife. She was known for her charm, her ability to light up a room. Friends described her as magnetic, someone who could make anyone feel special with just a smile. She had grown up in Florida, the daughter of a well-to-do family. Privileged, but never unkind. She had always been ambitious, determined to carve out a life on her own terms. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. Maybe it was the routine of married life, the predictability of it all. Maybe it was loneliness, or maybe it was something darker. Because when Damien Wolfe walked into her life, everything changed. Damien wasn't like Elliot. He wasn't methodical, stable, predictable. He was wild, spontaneous, a man who thrived on adrenaline. A former athlete turned fitness trainer, he had the kind of presence that made people stop and take notice. Vivian noticed, and once she did, she couldn't look away. It started small. A passing conversation at the gym, a lingering glance, a moment that should have ended there, but didn't. Private messages turned into late-night texts. Texts turned into secret coffee dates. Coffee dates turned into long, lingering drives to places where no one would recognize them. And then before either of them could stop it, the line had been crossed. What began as an escape became an obsession. Vivian had never felt this kind of thrill before. The excitement of sneaking around, the rush of stolen moments. It made her feel alive, like she was someone else, someone who wasn't just a wife, a mother, someone's predictable partner. She had fallen into something she couldn't walk away from, and she didn't want to. But secrets, they don't stay buried forever. It started as whispers, quiet suspicions, subtle changes that only those closest to the Carvers could notice. Vivian was on her phone more, always smiling at the screen, her mind somewhere else. She started dressing differently, taking more time before she left the house, making excuses to go out alone even when there was no reason to. Elliot saw it. He just didn't want to believe it. He tried to explain it away. Maybe she was just stressed. Maybe she needed space. Maybe, just maybe, it was all in his head. But others weren't so sure. A close friend of the couple later admitted that she had noticed the change in Vivian, that something was off, but when she confronted her, Vivian just laughed it off. She had nothing to worry about. Everything was fine, but everything was not fine, because Damien was growing impatient. He didn't want to be the secret anymore. He wanted Vivian to leave Elliot, to start fresh, to stop pretending. And Vivian? She was starting to crack under the pressure. The weight of the affair, the deception, the lies. It was all becoming too much. She was living a double life, and eventually, something had to give. She had 2 choices: walk away or make sure Elliot was out of the picture forever. Deception is a dangerous thing. It starts small, a whispered lie, a secret message, a promise to be careful. But the longer it goes on, the heavier it becomes. And for Vivian Carver, the weight of her double life was suffocating. Damien Wolfe had been patient, but patience has its limits. At first, the affair had been exhilarating. The thrill of sneaking around, the danger of getting caught, it had kept them going. But now, Damien wanted more time, more commitment, more of Vivian's life. And there was only one thing standing in the way: Elliot Carver. It started with subtle shifts, changes in Vivian's demeanor, her behavior. She wasn't just lying to Elliot anymore. She was lying to herself. She told Damien she was working on it, that she was planning to leave, but he didn't believe her, and when doubt crept in, so did something far more dangerous: jealousy. Damien hated sharing her. He started showing up unannounced, demanding answers, pressing her to make a decision, and when she hesitated, the arguments started. Witnesses later recalled hearing raised voices in the parking lot of the gym, Damien gripping Vivian's wrist, his face inches from hers, whispering something only she could hear. "Do you love me or not?" Vivian flinched, pulling away. Her gaze darted around, checking to see if anyone was watching. She knew she was losing control, and she knew Damien could sense it. At home, Elliot noticed something different too. His wife had become distant, irritated, her affection toward him forced. And then, one night, something changed. A friend of the couple later revealed that Elliot had confided in him over drinks. He had finally asked Vivian the question he had been too afraid to voice. "Is there someone else?" Vivian's response was instant. Too instant. "Of course not, that's ridiculous." Elliot wanted to believe her, but deep down, he knew the truth. Secrets never stay buried forever, and for Vivian, her double life was on the verge of collapse. She had been cornered, trapped between a husband who suspected too much and a lover who demanded too much. There was no way out. Unless, of course, she made one. It started with small, seemingly insignificant choices, late-night internet searches, discussions with Damien that ended in hushed tones, a quiet trip to the store where she made purchases that would later become key evidence in a trial. A bottle of sleeping pills, a set of disposable gloves, a tarp folded neatly at the bottom of her shopping cart. Alone, each item meant nothing, but together, they painted a terrifying picture. And then there were the text messages. "It has to be soon. I can't live like this anymore. He won't even see it coming." Oh. Each message was deleted almost immediately, but nothing truly disappears, and later, investigators would recover every word. Vivian wasn't just thinking about it anymore. She was planning it. And soon, that plan would become reality. It was a warm Florida evening. The sun had set hours ago, leaving the sky a deep shade of navy blue. Inside the Carver home, everything seemed normal. The children were asleep, the house was quiet, and Elliot Carver had no idea he was living his final moments. Vivian had cooked dinner, just like she always did, but this time there was something extra in Elliot's drink, something colorless, odorless, something that would make sure he never saw what was coming next. As he sipped his wine, Vivian watched. Every swallow brought him closer to the inevitable. And then, minutes later, it started. Elliot's vision blurred. His limbs felt heavy, his mind clouded with confusion. He tried to speak, but his words slurred together, barely recognizable. "Viv, what's happening?" But she didn't answer. She just watched, waiting. By the time he realized he was in danger, it was too late. He tried to stand, but his legs gave out beneath him. He collapsed onto the kitchen floor, his breath coming in shallow gasps. His body, once strong, powerful, was failing him. And then, the final act began. Damien was waiting outside. He knew what had to be done. With gloved hands, he stepped inside. The house was silent. Elliot was barely conscious, his body paralyzed by the drugs coursing through his veins. And Vivian? She didn't hesitate. A pillow, a firm grip. The last sounds Elliot Carver ever heard were muffled screams, his own. And then, just like that, silence. It was over. The perfect crime. Or so they thought. A murder without a body is just a story. An unfinished chapter. A mystery waiting to be solved. For 3 days, Elliot Carver's name was nothing more than a passing question. A text left unread. A voicemail unanswered. Friends assumed he was busy. Co-workers thought he had taken a trip. And Vivian? Well, she already knew the truth. For 3 days, she went about her life as if nothing had changed, waking up in the same bed, drinking from the same coffee mug, smiling at the same neighbors who had no idea that just a few feet away, behind a locked garage door, lay the lifeless body of her husband. She had planned for this, every detail, every step, but there was one thing she hadn't accounted for, something she couldn't control. Decay. It started as a faint odor, a scent so subtle, most people wouldn't have noticed it at first. But death doesn't stay quiet for long. It speaks, and by the 3rd day, it was screaming. The first person to notice was a neighbor, Linda Grayson, a retired schoolteacher who lived 2 doors down. Every morning, just after sunrise, she took her golden retriever for a walk along the quiet suburban street. And every morning, she passed the Carver house, giving a small wave if she happened to see Vivian or Elliot in the driveway. But on this particular morning, something was different. The garage door was closed, unusual for Elliot, who always left it slightly open for ventilation. The trash bins sat untouched at the curb, overflowing. Strange, considering trash day had been 2 days earlier, but it was the smell that made her stop. She wrinkled her nose, glancing toward the Carver home. The air was thick, humid, carrying a sickly sweet scent that sent an uneasy chill down her spine. She tried to ignore it, kept walking, but as the morning sun grew hotter, so did the smell. By noon, she wasn't the only one who noticed. Neighbors whispered. A mail carrier made a passing comment. Flies had begun to gather near the garage door, circling like vultures over a carcass. And that's when Linda made the call. "I don't know if it's anything," she told the 911 operator, "but I haven't seen Elliot in a few days, and there's a really bad smell coming from the garage." Less than an hour later, police arrived. The house itself seemed undisturbed, locked doors, closed curtains, but the moment officers pried open the garage door, the truth came spilling out. Inside, wrapped hastily in plastic, lay Elliot Carver's decomposing body. His face was unrecognizable, his skin discolored, his limbs stiff. A pool of darkened blood seeped from beneath the tarp, a grotesque reminder that this was no accident. The officers stepped back, covering their noses, their expressions unreadable. But one thing was clear: this wasn't just a crime scene. This was a grave. Forensic investigators moved quickly. Every detail mattered. Every trace left behind was a potential clue, and despite Vivian's meticulous planning, she had made mistakes. First, the security footage. The Carver's neighborhood was lined with security cameras, on porches, at intersections, above garage doors. Detectives pulled the footage from the night of Elliot's disappearance, scanning frame by frame, and there, at 11:47 p.m., they saw it. A second car, a dark sedan, parked just down the street. It wasn't Elliot's, it wasn't Vivian's, and it wasn't a random passerby. It lingered for too long, waiting, watching. Then, at 12:03 a.m., it pulled into the Carver driveway. The driver stepped out, face obscured by shadows, movements calculated. Detectives froze the frame, They had their first real lead. Then there were the purchases. Receipts recovered from Vivian's personal account showed an unsettling pattern. Just days before Elliot's murder, she had made several purchases that, at the time, seemed unrelated. A bottle of prescription-grade sleeping pills, but no record of a prescription. A plastic tarp, the same kind found wrapped around Elliot's body. A set of disposable gloves, latex, size small. Each purchase alone meant nothing, but together, they told a story of preparation, of intent, of a plan unfolding in plain sight. But it was the text messages that sealed her fate. Police obtained a warrant for Vivian's phone records. At first it seemed clean, too clean. No suspicious messages, no incriminating conversations, but deleted texts aren't gone forever. Deep in the encrypted data, investigators found what she had tried so hard to erase. We have to make sure it looks natural. It needs to happen soon. He won't even see it coming. The recipient, Damien Wolfe. And just like that, this was no longer a case of a grieving widow. This was a conspiracy. At first, Vivian played the part of the heartbroken wife flawlessly. The moment police knocked on her door, she gasped, clutched her chest, tears welled in her eyes, a performance so convincing that for a split second even the officers almost believed her. "My husband is dead?" she cried. No, that's not possible." She covered her mouth, trembled, repeated the question over and over. But what detectives saw wasn't grief. It was theatre. They let her talk, let her weave her story, but as she did, the cracks began to show. "When was the last time you saw Elliot?" I don't know. Maybe 2 nights ago?" "But Linda Grayson says you told her Elliot left on a work trip 3 days ago. Which one is it?" Vivian faltered. She licked her lips, eyes darting. A micro-expression, a flicker of fear. The kind of fear that only comes when you realize the lie is unraveling. Still, detectives needed more, and that's when they got it. The security footage, the receipts, the texts, and that dark sedan. They traced the license plate, ran the records, and when the name came back, it sent a ripple through the entire investigation. Damien Wolfe. Elliot Carver wasn't just murdered. He was eliminated. And the woman sobbing in front of them? She didn't do it alone. The case was no longer about who killed Elliot Carver. That part was obvious. Now it was about something far more chilling. How far had they gone to cover it up? And how much longer could they keep the truth from coming out? Vivian thought she had time. She thought she was ahead of them, 1 step, maybe 2. But killers always make the same mistake. They underestimate the patience of those hunting them. For 2 weeks after Elliot Carver's body was discovered, detectives watched her, every move, every expression, every nervous glance over her shoulder. She was careful, too careful. She wiped down surfaces, deleted messages, cleared her browser history. But some things can't be erased. Surveillance teams followed her to a small motel on the outskirts of town. She had booked the room under a fake name, Rachel Devereaux, but the ID, the cameras, they didn't lie. And neither did the phone records. That dark sedan, the one caught on security footage the night of the murder, it had been rented under Damien Wolfe's name, but the credit card used to pay for it, that was Vivian's. The evidence was stacked. The warrant was signed, and at exactly 2:17 a.m., the tactical unit moved in. A dozen officers, silent, swift, guns drawn. They breached the motel door before she could even reach for the bedside lamp. "Vivian Carver, you're under arrest for the murder of your husband, Elliot Carver. Hands where we can see them." Tss. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She just stared, frozen, as if for the first time she understood what was happening. And then she smiled. Vivian was brought into the station, cuffs still tight around her wrists. The room was small, sterile, Just four walls, a metal table, and the weight of everything she had done pressing down on her. She sat back, crossed her arms, tilted her head slightly to the side, as if this were nothing more than an inconvenience. And when the lead detective slid a folder across the table, her bank statements, her text messages, the receipts for the plastic tarp, she barely even blinked. "We know you did it, Vivian. We just want to know why." Silence. "You don't have to say anything. But right now, Damien Wolfe is in the next room, and he's talking about everything." At that, she laughed, low, amused. Then she leaned forward. "Then you don't need me, do you?" she whispered. The detective didn't move, didn't blink, just pushed one last piece of paper toward her. A photo of the security footage of her standing in her driveway, watching Damien Wolfe drag Elliot's body toward the garage. Her jaw tightened, the color drained from her face, and for the first time since her arrest, she looked afraid. "You can talk now," the detective said, voice low, "or you can spend the rest of your life paying for his mistake." Vivian swallowed hard. Her fingers trembled against the table, and then she opened her mouth. "I want a lawyer." The trial began 6 months later, a packed courtroom, a judge with a reputation for delivering harsh sentences, a jury that had already made up their minds before the opening statement even finished. Vivian Carver, now clad in an orange jumpsuit, sat motionless as the prosecution laid out their case. They showed the receipts, the texts, the security footage. They played the 911 call. And then they called Damien Wolfe to the stand. He was unrecognizable, thinner, hollowed out, shackles around his wrists, the weight of a plea deal hanging over his head. And when the prosecutor asked him to explain what happened that night, he told them everything. "She planned it," he said, voice shaking. She said we'd be together, that we just had to get rid of him first." Vivian didn't move, didn't react, but in that moment, everyone saw it. The truth. The jury deliberated for just 2 hours. When they returned, the courtroom fell silent. We, the jury, find the defendant, Vivian Carver, guilty. The sentence? Life in prison. No parole. No second chances. Just the cold, unrelenting consequence of her actions. As the judge read the final ruling, Vivian exhaled sharply. No tears, no begging, just a slow, quiet nod, as if she had known, all along, that this would be the ending. Elliot Carver trusted the woman he loved, and for that he paid the ultimate price. But in the end, justice caught up. What do you think? Did Vivian deserve her fate? Or was there something more to this story that we'll never know? If you made it this far, make sure to hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because this case, it's just one of many, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Elliot Carver was more than just a name in a headline. He was a father, a son, a friend, and for those who knew him, the pain of his loss didn't end in the courtroom. His sister, Laura Carver, still remembers the moment she got the call. "I dropped the phone," she later said in an interview. I dropped it, because in that moment my brain refused to believe it. Elliot wasn't just my brother, he was my best friend. And now, he was gone. His mother, Margaret Carver, hasn't stepped foot in the family home since that night. She couldn't bear it. The empty chair at the dinner table, the silence where his laughter used to be. "He deserved more," she whispered through tears. "He deserved so much more." But the Carver family didn't just grieve. They fought. In the months after Vivian's conviction, they launched the Elliot Carver Foundation, an organization dedicated to helping victims of domestic deception and financial fraud, because to them, Elliot's story wasn't just about murder. It was about betrayal. "She stole his love, his trust, his money," Laura said. And when that wasn't enough, she took his life. But she won't take his legacy. That belongs to us. Vivian Carver entered the state penitentiary a convicted murderer. But what kind of prisoner did she become? Some inmates crumble. Some break under the weight of their guilt. But Vivian adapted. Within weeks of her incarceration, she had settled in. She kept to herself. She read books in the prison library, and according to correctional officers, she maintained an almost eerie level of composure. Most new inmates struggle, one guard recalled. They cry, they lash out. But her, she just smiled. But was she remorseful? Did she feel any regret for what she had done? Her official response? I did what I had to do. Not I'm sorry. Not I made a mistake. Just those 6 chilling words. And then came the rumors. Whispers from fellow inmates, letters sent to a mysterious P.O. box, late-night conversations that ended when guards walked by. Was Vivian planning something? Was she manipulating those around her, even behind bars? For now, the answers remain buried behind prison walls. But one thing is certain. Vivian Carver is no ordinary inmate. And the story? It's not over yet. The trial ended. The verdict was delivered. But then, investigators started looking deeper. There were questions, unanswered details, and one name that kept coming up in whispers: Damien Wolfe. Vivian's supposed accomplice. The man who took the stand and pointed the finger at her. The man who claimed he was just following orders. But was he? During a follow-up investigation, detectives uncovered something chilling: a hidden bank account. The account had been opened months before Elliot Carver's murder, and the name attached to it? Not Vivian's, not Elliot's, but Damien Wolfe's. And inside that account? Nearly $150,000. Money that had been transferred just days before Elliot's death. Where did it come from? Who sent it? And more importantly, was this really just about love? Or was it something bigger? Authorities are still investigating, but some believe that Vivian Carver may not have been the mastermind at all. Perhaps, just perhaps, she was being used. So what do you think? Was Vivian truly the mastermind? Or was she just another pawn in a bigger, deadlier game? And if new evidence does emerge, could this case take one final shocking twist? Let us know in the comments, and if you haven't already, subscribe, because this is just one story, and trust me, there's so much more to uncover. If only they had seen the warning signs, this could have been prevented. If only someone had noticed the way Elliot hesitated before answering her calls, if they had caught the fear behind his smile, if they had asked the right questions before it was too late. But no one did, because Vivian Carver didn't just plan a murder. She played a role, and for the longest time, everyone believed her. A devoted wife, a grieving woman, a victim in her own twisted story. And now, she sits behind bars, her secrets locked away, but the question lingers. Was this really the end?
Because justice may have been served in court, but somewhere out there, Damien Wolfe is still walking free.
And if this case has taught us anything, it's that monsters don't always look like monsters. So, what do you think? Did Vivian Carver deserve her fate? Or is there more to this case than we know?
Could there be evidence still out there, waiting to be found?
Drop your theories in the comments below. We read every single one. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because this is just one story, and trust me, there are so many more. Stay safe, stay curious, and until next time, keep watching.